when you think about how cannabis has progressed throughout these like decades now, you've seen it from non-prohibition to prohibition, now getting legalized again, and India is just sitting in the back because like having their old conservative thoughts like the politics, and nobody's really focusing on that culture. Like even I didn't know all of this that you knew, that people were just like openly. We do know that there's some places where you can go and get hash. A lot of their economy, like people make money just from making hand rubbed hash, but those are like very little spots in India now.
Sure.
Maybe way less than what it was before. How do you see us basically going back to that now?
I think it's education. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of what the film is about, is to show that people who consume cannabis are not a danger to society.
Yeah.
Because that's what the war on drug was so successful in creating this image that somehow cannabis consumers were a danger to society.
Yeah.
When we were really young, I remember Frenchy saying how afraid he was to talk to his parents about cannabis consumption because his mother would have thought, you're going to bring shame to the family. The neighbors are going to ostracize us. It's
Yeah.
going to be a disaster, as opposed to understanding that just made her son feel really good.
Yeah.
That just improved his day-to-day life experience.
Yeah.
I think it's so tragic that the war on drugs was exported to cultures with traditional use of medicinal plants.
Yeah.
Because at some point in your history, it was understood this is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
This is a thing that ties us to our spirituality, because cannabis in India was traditionally associated with Shivaism and other aspects of the Hindu religion. It ties us to the plants that just naturally grow here and the wisdom of some of our ancestors to understand that this plant had a therapeutic use.
Yeah.
When you look at some of the medical books in the Vedic tradition, they talk about medicinal use. And I think also there was a study done. I don't remember the exact title. The English looked at the turn of the century. They went into India. They wanted to determine if cannabis use caused insanity.
Yeah.
Because if it caused insanity, they were going to make it illegal
Yeah.
under colonization. And so they did this study for like 8 years. It's a huge write-up on it. That's where we got the bong recipe, actually, because they took down, they
Yeah.
interviewed all these local traditional pharmacists and people who were, kind of prominent in society at the time. So they took down recipes. They have all kinds of interesting notes in this. But they determined it wasn't illegal. So then their next step was to determine how they could tax it. And so then you find a lot of really interesting documentation on the use of bong in Indian society at the time, how it was stored. They even calculated, I think originally the cannabis plant material was stored in bales. And so the English had this idea, we're going to store it in these kind of square containers, because then we can stack them one on top of the others and make it really easy to count them to be able to tax it more easily. So it's a really fascinating read, and to understand that not that long ago, there was a acceptance of cannabis use to a degree. At least it was part of Indian society.
I mean, either the Britishers wanted to like prohibit us from something, or just tax it and make more money out of it. So even if they decided being that cannabis is safe, we could have obviously gotten more. But I think you're right that going back to how it was before, making sure that it's safe, because bhang is again legal in India. In certain states, Supreme Court has said that you can use cannabis medicinally. The only problem is, where do you get cannabis from?
Well, that's that catch-22 that they've done in a number of places. They did the same thing in Spain with the social clubs there.
Yeah.
That they wanted harmony in society, so they said, okay, you can have your cannabis social clubs, but you can't see them from the street.
Yeah.
It has to be private. And that worked out very well. But the catch-22 was same thing. You're not allowed to grow, and you're not allowed to import.
Yeah.
So where was all this cannabis magically coming from? It was a gray area that they're still struggling with.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't allow a plant to grow, also government is going places and just like basically it's weed, so they think of it as like a weed plant, so they're just taking it off and making sure that nobody gets their hands on it. Then they let it dry up in some warehouse or something and then distribute it. I've seen those bags of cannabis. It's like stems sticks and some dried up leaves. And how do you make good medicine out of bush?
I think the biggest challenge is we have what we refer to here as the legacy culture. People who have been risking their lives for
Yeah.
generations to learn how to grow safe, good cannabis,
Yeah.
excellent cannabis for human consumption. It's horrible how these governments like Canada and maybe your government and the United States, they've relied on business people who don't smoke,
Yeah.
who've never seen a cannabis plant, to give them guidance
Yeah.
in how to structure the regulations and in how to, and in some cases, how to grow the plant. I think
Yeah.
here in Canada, when they originally
Yeah.
started out, they had people running those facilities that maybe had run, I don't know, had some experience in growing tomatoes or, whatever, but they didn't, that Frenchy used to say, if you want to have a successful cannabis market, you need to employ drug dealers.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's what they are, right? They basically, for years, the decades, I mean, they were growing in their basements or places where it was kind of hidden from everyone. And now once it gets legalized, they don't really get a chance to do anything. Like, don't get to participate. They don't get to voice their opinions. There's some people who are back in the medical cannabis industry in Canada. They got to have some say in policy making. But now if you see, they're selling you a gram flour in like 5 boxes. I'm over exaggerating, but it's 2 boxes, a box
Yeah.
and a box, and then that's very difficult to open. They say it should be kid safe, but it's adult safe. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many people
I
can't
know.
open it, especially like people above like 55, 65 who have arthritis.
with
and-
arthritis,
Yeah.
Frenchy had that too,
Yeah.
where he would be just like, no, and you want to take a knife to it
Yeah,
or
so
something.
so many people come to us and they're like, "Can you please open it for
Yeah.
me?" And then obviously you have to do it, but government is creating so many more barriers now for it to be legalized. And we were talking before the podcast started, like you can just go to a grocery store, or you can even go to a alcohol store and just grab whatever you want, go to the counter, and a kid can open it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, so it's more responsible. Adults are obviously responsible for their own kids. Why is government being?
It's a double standard.
Yeah.
Because I know in the United States, every year we have quite a high number of people who die from alcohol poisoning,
Yeah.
especially at the universities.
Yeah.
There's this culture is in the universities when kids first go there that now they're an adult and they're
Yeah.
free to do what they want. And so there's definitely a double standard and a hypocrisy around that
Yeah.
because, as you said, we have these twist top lids now for alcohol.
Yeah.
That any child could open, and once it's open, it's not child safe the
Yeah.
way that we're obliged to have it for the cannabis containers. And it just feels silly to me because the biggest danger that you run in overconsumption of cannabis is you're going to fall into kind of a coma type sleep.
Yeah.
And then when your body's processed it, you're going to wake up like nothing happened. I was joking with you that I had the dog that he got a hold of some hash. He ate
Yeah.
a big chunk of hash once when Frenchy didn't see him. And he just tipped over and slept for 24 hours. And I was so worried about him. I was worried about hydration. I stayed up all night watching him. And then the next morning, when he woke up, he kind of just like bound up and he looked at me like, okay, let's have breakfast. And I was, I was like, "Ow, after all that, you scared me so much. But yeah.
Yeah, it's always like, I think the stigma has been so much and for so long that people in power, even after they realize that there's medical benefits, obviously there's so much tax, so they want that tax money now.
I mean, I think it comes back to, people often ask me, so what do you think is the greatest need for the industry right now? And I think it's basic education.
Yeah.
We really need, and that's part of what I'm trying to do with the film, because the film showcases farmers who are good people, who are normal people,
Yeah.
who send their kids to birthday parties and who raise llamas on their farms so
Yeah.
that this can help be the natural fertilizer. Cannabis is not dangerous, and consumed responsibly can make a lot of people feel that their life is better because of it. Make them feel better in their skin.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody, but I'm not saying everybody should consume it any more than I would say everybody should consume almost anything: whiskey, sugar, coffee.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, everyone has their own way of consuming cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So many people now, because of legalization, now they're trying, like they had one bad experience back in their college, whatever. Now they're trying like drinks, edibles to help with sleep, pain, and that too all through the recreational market. Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody did that when it was legally, like medically legal, because now they can just go to a store. So I think all of those positives have come through legalization. But again, all the thing is, I followed this one guy on LinkedIn. He every day, every good company that I know that makes cannabis, they all are financially like dead. So even if you make good cannabis, they're not able to financially sustain themselves, at least here in Canada with all these regulations.
So that's why Frenchy asked me, towards the end of his life, he said, well, we stopped producing before COVID hit, thank goodness. And so during the pandemic, we didn't produce at all. Frenchy focused on writing his book, and Jake focused on finishing the film. So when that kind of towards the end of life, he said to me, don't get involved again in manufacturing. Focus just on the educational legacy. Focus on making people understand how easy it is for them to make their own hashish. Frenchy did a 4-part series of videos on how to make hashish using the mini washer. And so after his death, somebody came to me on the Facebook group that we have to support. We have what's called the Lost Art of the Hashishing Facebook group, where people can ask questions about hash making, and we give them support. So somebody came to me from Brazil, somebody speaking Portuguese, and said, would you allow me to translate the subtitles of your video series into Portuguese so that all of Frenchy's followers in Portugal can more easily understand what he's saying? We would do that as an open source project. We would donate our time, and on top of it, they were in the film industry, so they had the software to be able to put the subtitles to match where people were speaking. And I said, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. And so then I made people aware that, like, hey, look, Overgrow Shop in Brazil, they've made the subtitles available for free for all of you. Please enjoy that. And so then somebody was like, well, I'm going to do the French for you, and I'm going to do the Spanish, I'm going to do the Italian, I'm going to do the German. So now we have the do-it-yourself video series on hash making available in 6 languages.
That's amazing.
And we currently have people working on the Hebrew and the Chinese. After I did the New York screening, I got 2 new translator groups.
So basically, you're going all over the world without even going all over the world, just through those videos.
Well, and because, these mini washers are really, they're small, they're inexpensive. And I really feel that we're at a time in human history where people need to control a little bit more their own destiny and what they have access to. So I think a lot of us during the pandemic, we started our own backdoor gardens because we were, during the pandemic, there were periods where there wasn't much in the store. And so I think people were like, whoa, this is a little scary. So let me kind of be a little bit more independent in terms of assuring some of my food access. And so my challenge to people is you should be doing the same for the cannabis that you need. In most places, it's legal to grow 4 to 6 plants. If you grow those 4 to 6 plants for your family, and you can probably have like a couple harvests a year, from that, you can also make some traditional hashish. And then when you do that, you can store that quite a long time, and it'll retain its goodness. So we talked to everybody about that. It's covered in the whole video series.
That's amazing. I also saw a study that you guys were doing on aging hash and all of those things. I think someone here in
we do it here with the High North Labs in Canada. They helped us with that first study. And part of what I'm doing with the Frenchy Cannoli Foundation is we're going to be organizing fundraisers and whatnot to generate money so that I can do the second series of study with more cultivars and more, in depth. So
that's amazing. I mean, before we end this, one question from all the audience: why is hash better than dried flower in some aspects? What would you think are the better aspects of hash?
So Frenchy used to say that when you consume the flower, or even when you consume rosin, the high is a little bit more speedy and in your face. But for, when you press and you decarb the hashish and you let it age for a couple of months, the high becomes a little bit more cozy. He used to say it was like He's like, it's like being enveloped in a cozy blanket in front of the fire on a fluffy rug.
Yeah.
That it made him feel good all over.
Yeah.
So I know this is not a one size fits all for all people, but I think for a lot of people, it's going to be psychoactively a very comfortable place.
Yeah.
And the one caveat is it depends on the THC content of the product. One of the problems we have going right now is the breeders are focusing on way too much on creating super high THC product. And what people need to understand is super high THC product, that's what causes anxiety. When we look at traditional charas and hashish, there was a study done in 2014 in one lab in Israel called the Lumiere Labs.
Yeah.
And they showed that the charas that we were smoking back in the 1980s, it was testing between 3 to 5% THC. But it had abundant terpenes.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the breeding that we've got going on right now is misguided. It's focusing way too much on high THC and not enough on which terpenes are showing up in the plant material.
Yeah. I mean, I've only had experience of like in traditional hash maybe 3-4 times, and all the times I really think that it didn't give me that, like, you could say high where you're like just going crazy or something. It gives you a high where you can function, talk to people. Like I really like that feeling, and I've been trying to get that everywhere. But again, in Canada, like people are just wanting to buy like 30% THC, whatever percent THC. That's what goes wrong.
Grow your own and make your own.
Yeah, that's the next step now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Madam Cannoli. It was amazing. Your knowledge is amazing, and all the best with your film. Hopefully, we are still here till 5 to watch the film with you. But if not, I think you said it's coming on.
It'll be available on
pay-per-view, right?
streaming,
Yeah.
and we now have the FrenchyDreamsOfHashish.com website, and at the bottom of the page there's a link for streaming. You can sign up, and I will alert you when it's available.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put that link in the bottom of this video too. Share it everywhere.
Thank you.
And all the best with your screening, and hope to meet you in Humboldt County now.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Take care.